working okay. YouTube is one of these things where they have this function where you can go live, and I'm making sure that it's working here.
So you're recording this right to YouTube from Skype?
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want, Kerr, we can also, people can ask questions, and I'll be able to read them, and then we can answer those questions if you like. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
And we can kind of answer those as they come along, or we can wait till later on. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Looks like we are live. We got a couple of people watching us. So, I am very honored to have a gentleman here. His name is Kerr Cuhulain. I just went over how to pronounce his name. And we were talking earlier about some of the stuff that he's been doing lately, kind of how he got involved in the Satanic Panic, or debunking it. And we're talking about his Order of Knighthood. And Kerr, go ahead and take it away. I'm really honored to have you as a guest, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show and giving me this opportunity. The Satanic Panic we were talking about earlier was something that happened back in the 80s and 90s. And I had joined the Vancouver Police Department, and I had come out about my beliefs, and inside of 2 weeks discovered I was the first Wiccan officer to do so in North America. And that put me in a position where I had all kinds of people coming to me and asking me about what I was and what I did. And that is what ultimately led to me writing the first book, The Law Enforcement Guide to Wicca, that I put out there. But it also resulted in me getting involved in anti-defamation work with the Witches League for Public Awareness, for example. And this ultimately developed into me being recognized by law enforcement agencies as an expert in hate crimes involving minority religions, which a lot of pagans can identify with. But every single time I came out and spoke about this stuff, I was approached by other minorities within my department, Jews and Sikhs and LGBT and all kinds of other groups, because they were having similar problems from similar kinds of people. So basically, I went for 25 years around North America talking to law enforcement agencies, public groups, trying to educate them about pagan beliefs, and ultimately ended up being the head of Officers of Avalon for 5 years, which is an organization that represents police, firefighters, and paramedics who are pagan, and it's still out there doing good work. And that ultimately led me into all kinds of requests, people coming in wanting to join that organization that weren't in any of those trades, but looked at this as a order of knighthood. So that ultimately ended up me founding the Order of Paladins, which I'm still part of, which is teaching people how to use a modern code of chivalry and live according to a certain order of precepts. And it led into a whole lot of books that I wrote on warrior philosophy. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and what I'm all about. And nowadays I'm also teaching at our Dantane, which is Amber K's School of Magic. And I was just last weekend teaching about hate crimes. So obviously there's still interest in how people do this. And basically this was perpetrated by people who put out misinformation for 3 reasons. They wanted money, they wanted power, they wanted attention, and any combination of those. And if you look at these people, you see that even though they may masquerade as someone who is a fundamentalist Christian, they aren't really devout or spiritual in any way. It's all about money, power, and influence, and any way they can get it. And this is the way they've discovered they can do this. They put the information out there. It put a whole lot of people at disadvantage, because people like myself would have to explain who we were and try to prove that this was misinformation. It spawned a whole lot of wasted time, police officers running around investigating things that had never happened. It ended up in a whole lot of lawsuits that finally collapsed the recovered memory stuff that came out of books like Michel Remembers. And it created a whole lot of havoc and problems for people in the pagan community. It basically collapsed under the weight of itself. There's no evidence to support it. Lawsuits and everything else eventually kind of died down, but it seems to be the people who perpetrated this are trying to go out there and start talking about it again and put it in front of a new audience with new platforms like YouTube. So it's frustrating to see them doing this. Yeah,
and that's what you and I were talking about before this, is because you and I remember from the 80s they had the Satanic Panic, and then people had the platform of radio and then television shows, and sometimes they would get one guest spot, maybe two if they were lucky, and that was their platform. And then there was enough light exposed onto them that enough people saw this and started talking to people, and law enforcement got involved, where they found out that this was all bullshit. It was all being perpetuated by other people. It's just because 10 people believe it doesn't mean it's true. And so
it's an urban legend.
I'm sorry, what?
It's an urban legend. It's a story that's passed on from one person to the next. And it's something that I heard from a friend of a friend, but you can't actually trace it back to a beginning necessarily. A very good example within the Satanic Panic was this thing called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which came out of Russia in about 1903, I think it was. And this was supposed to be a captured document from a group called the Elders of Zion, which was a Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. And it was a propaganda thing that the government put out there. And I mean, it has been proven time and again to be false. It was a complete fabrication, but a number of the people involved in the Satanic Panic took out the word Jew, put in the word Satan, and flew it again. And you saw it coming up in Cornerstone magazine and all kinds of different publications as if this was true. And the alarming thing about this was you saw people putting themselves forward as law enforcement experts, like Lyle Rapacki, who had a very impressive resume, all these different schools that he got degrees from, and he was with the Arizona Supreme Court and all these different groups. And he went out lecturing to law enforcement agencies about how to identify satanic cults. And he had all these declassified documents that he presented. Well, the declassified documents were reprints of articles that had appeared in newspapers. If you went and you looked at his resume and you checked all the different faculties he claimed to have studied at and got degrees, none of it was true. But these police agencies were accepting it at face value and had them lecturing. They just accepted that, well, he wouldn't lie about this resume, would he? Yeah, he would. And lots of these people did, It is really disappointing to see people not checking into people's backgrounds, but this happened time and again. You saw ridiculous lists in these law enforcement manuals saying, if you find objects like this in the house, these people are Satanists. And it's things like tacks and candles and photographic equipment and perfume. And any house in North America, you would find these things. It's right out of the Malleus Maleficarum from the Middle Ages, Right. So it was really crazy how far this went and how involved this got. A lot of these people in law enforcement, for example, knew that this wouldn't stand up to scrutiny and that there were people out there that would actively discourage this. So they formed networks to try and force this through the system to get these things into court. And an example of that is Lieutenant Larry Jones in the Boise, Idaho Police Department. He formed this group called Cult Crime Impact Network Incorporated. 2/3 of the membership were ministers, actually, not law enforcement people, but there were people he hoped to use to shore up this thing and force it through the system. And I mean, it was quite easy to take the thing down. I signed up as a member. He didn't do any background checks like any of the rest of them. And so I got in there, got the whole mailing list and gave it to the FBI. End of story. But really stupid. Yeah. But, it's disappointing when you see people doing this sort of thing. And yet we were talking about this, how we don't teach people to to reason, to use logic anymore in school. We just give them facts, they memorize these and put them in a test. And we don't teach people how to think. They don't. And it's very easy for someone to come up and present a story like this and be accepted. You know, Michael Warnke, who started the entire thing with the book, The Satan Seller, which is a complete fabrication. I mean, it has been shown to be a fraud, not just by people in the pagan community, but by the Christian community, you know, by Christian journalists. And he's still out there doing this. He's a very good comedian. He has done thousands and thousands of shows. He makes millions of dollars doing this, and it's all a lie, you know, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, I guess when they get, when they have a good personality and people begin to kind of like them, and then they kind of have an influence, people are just willy. But the thing that I get is that every time I really like challenge somebody who's like a follower of, say, like Bill Schnabel or really believes him, is I will ask them, well, how do you know? And what they'll do is when it comes down to it, they'll reference another person. Well, all of these people say it. This whole website is dedicated to it. It's like, okay, where are they getting their information? And then after a certain point, they always throw it back at me like, well, you don't know because you just want to protect it, or you're not high enough on the ranks of being a Wiccan or whatever that you don't know what goes on. And I'm just like, okay.
Those are the two most common things. I mean, Schnabel's a good example because Bill, for a while in the beginning, played around with various different Wiccan and pagan groups, then went and studied Mormon stuff, then finally became a fundamentalist and said, this is the one that's going to work. And away he went and just repeated the same process that Warnke had started. But he had the advantage where he knew some things about pagans that Warnke didn't, so he plugged those in there to make it look like there was some truth to this. But it's the urban legend thing. I heard from a friend and everyone's talking about it, therefore there must be some substance. Right. Not necessarily. And if you can't find it, then it's because there's a higher level you can't access. It's that, you know, conspiracy thing. It's like part of the reason the whole thing collapsed. They were claiming that up to 2 million children a year were being kidnapped and sacrificed. No evidence of this at all. You know, we knew at the time this was happening there were 20,000 homicides in the United States, which had nothing to do with anything occult. So you're telling me that there are, you know, several orders of magnitude more happening that we have no evidence for? I mean, where are the bodies? There aren't any, you know. But everyone's talking about it. Therefore, there must be some substance to it. It's your classic urban legend.
Right. Now, I'm familiar, Kerr, but I don't think many of my viewers are. But you come from a law enforcement background, so when you say statistics like this and when you mention stuff like this, you're not just pulling this out of nowhere. You actually know. You've worked in the field. You know what you're talking about. Right.
Yeah, I spent, 28 years with Vancouver Police and then 8 years dispatching for them, so 36 in total. But for 25 of the years that I was with Vancouver Police, I was actively investigating these people and going around dealing with hate crimes. And, I would regularly get people call me and say, we found this unusual thing and maybe this is it. And a lot of it was just demystifying things. I mean, my favorite example is a detective who called to say that there was this former Anglican church that was in the southwest part of the city where I was a police officer, and that this lady had phoned in to say people were coming and going at all hours of the day in strange costumes, and she was afraid they were doing some sort of satanic rituals in there, and maybe they were sacrificing cats, and oh my dear. So he called and said, could you look into this? Well, at the corner of 39th and Dunbar, there is a former Anglican church. It had at that time been deconsecrated for 13 years. And there were people coming and going at all hours of the day in strange costumes. And the sign outside said ballet school. Seriously. I mean,
strange costumes, huh?
Yeah. I had, the border agency called me once saying that this person who wanted to get citizenship was doing these rituals in their backyard. And I said, well, describe them to me. And they did in detail. And I said, yes, sweat lodge. This is the kind of thing that I did mostly. It was demystifying things for people. And there isn't occult crime happening out there. And there are Satanists out there. They don't do crime either, you know.
Right.
I mean, you know, there is Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino and Paul Valentine. They all have their satanic churches out there, but they don't do any of this stuff either, you know.
Right.
So it really is people being afraid of things that they don't understand. And the places where I got the most problem were in small towns where everybody was more or less the same. I remember going in 1994, there was the Robin Hood Hill murder that happened in West Memphis. And the Unitarian Church brought me down to talk to various different groups because they were concerned about this satanic panic sort of taking hold and people having problems down there. And I remember speaking at the Faculty of Psychology at Memphis University, and we have 300 people, and it's all civilized. And this is a big city where they're used to a diverse population, where you're used to seeing different people. Mm-hmm. So you're more comfortable with it. Then I'm in Jonesboro, where I've got the entire police department in the front row, bodyguards, I'm in body armor, there's this media scrum, it's just a zoo. Because here you've got pretty much homogenous white population, and we're afraid of anything different. You know, so when I first joined the Vancouver Police Department, it was 1,200 white males. I mean, we had 3 token female officers who were useful for searching prisoners. And that was about it. When I left, it was 16% female, 14% other ethnic groups. And it had changed dramatically because now you've got Sikhs and you've got Jews and you've got Confucians and you've got people who are gay and you've got people who have changed sex who are members of the department. And now people are more used to that. So a lot of this has to do with people's discomfort with things that are different. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you put 10 different people in a field and they all witness the same event, one's going to see Jesus, one's going to see Mary, one's going to see Urzuli, one's going to see Gaia, one's going to see UFO, and at least one's going to go, what are you all looking at? Because they're all looking at the same thing, but they're perceiving it from different cultural, social, and educational backgrounds. You know, I was on an interfaith council in Surrey. And I remember one of the Anglican ministers on that council was saying to me, you know what I like about this? We're all seekers. And our perspectives illuminate each other's. You know, there's a guy that's used to the idea that you could look at the same thing and see something different, but recognize that it's still spiritual. But these people, again, are not trying to convert you to something because they're spiritual. They're trying to present a threat, right, and themselves as a solution. You know, there's a dangerous cult out there. They're sacrificing children. If you come to my church and give me money, I'll protect you. That's what they're trying to do. Right. It's about money and power and influence. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Memphis Three was one of those cases that I think really brought this to the public's attention. And the thing that you had mentioned about the Malleus Maleficarium, I think is really kind of interesting because basically, people in the village were accusing people of killing their cow or killing their chicken or making their cow not produce milk or whatever. And they said they're a witch. They cursed me. And that's all the proof that they needed, was to point at somebody and accuse them of something. And then they would torture the person, and basically the person would eventually confess to it. And then
same thing. We have people claiming there's a satanic presence out there, a conspiracy. Here's the list. This is what to look for. They're doing this. They are the enemy. And, you know, it's a variation of the same thing, you know. Exactly. Yeah. A lot of the things that you see in the Malleus Maleficarum, you saw on some of those lists that I pulled out of, you know, there was one law enforcement, guide to occult crime by a guy by the name of Edwin Anderson. He was a sergeant in the California Police Department. And it illustrated another problem that we had here. He put in this book a list of signs of the zodiac. And 2 of them were actually signs of the zodiac. The others were mathematical symbols. They were squiggles. They were the gods only know what. And I actually wrote to him and said, where did you get that? He found a teenager who thought he was a witch and or Satanist, and this kid gave it to him. The kid's probably still laughing, he thought, I found a Satanist, and so I'm going to use this. All you need to do is open the morning paper to see what the signs of the zodiac are. The horoscopes in there, right? But he could go to a library and look it up. But nope, I'm going to take it from this 15-year-old who, even if he is serious about his beliefs, hasn't been practicing them very long.
Right.
And this is presented to law enforcement people as evidence. It's just tragic. In the same book, it had Zoso, the three-headed dog that guards the gateway to hell. Well, Zoso's out of Led Zeppelin album.
Right.
And the three-headed dog that guards Hades, which isn't hell, is Cerebus. But yeah, it was amusing and yet frustrating to see these people doing this and putting this information out there and presenting it as fact. And this guy was actually a law enforcement officer, Crazy.
Yeah, it's really funny. There was a gentleman, I don't know if you've heard of him, Mark Passio.
No.
No? Okay. Well, Mark Passio, I did a debunk video on him. Basically, he got Zener cards. Zener cards they do for
yes.
And so he called those occult symbols. And
okay.
And I was doing the video on him. I was like, no, they're not occult symbols. Those are Zener cards that they use to test people if they had psychic abilities. And it's so funny because from our perspective, we look at these and then the way that these people present it as, and this is a cult, this is an occult symbol, this is an occult ritual, this is an occult thing. We're looking at it, we're like, no, that's not. That doesn't have anything. And which type of occult are you talking about? Because there's a whole gamut of who is what. There's Voodoo, there's Pagan, Druid, Wiccan. There's a whole gamut. And even within the Wiccan community, there's a whole gamut of different types of people. So it's really funny when they do this. And then the thing that's disturbing to me is that other people who don't know just assume that these people are experts.
Yes.
And that's kind of the scary part is these people just kind of believe them,
Yeah, it's a lot of the information they're putting out is not in context. And one of my favorite examples of this is this symbol here, the Cornu, right? They're saying this is the satanic salute. Well, it's also, this is the sign of the buffalo for, First Nations people. This is, I'm a Pyro gang member. This is, I'm a Texas Longhorns fan. It's a whole lot of, this is right. American sign language slang for bullshit. Which is telling. So, if you take these things out of context, but if you're not familiar with the context, it's very easy to present them that way, and this is part of the problem. These people present themselves as respectable people who are reverends in some church and, I am here to do good things. Well, they're not, it's partially because we have this Abrahamic system of religions out there that is based on guilt, where you have people who go in there and they have this list of thou shalt not, and they go through the week doing things that they know they shouldn't be doing and that they know are harmful to themselves and others. And at the end of the week, they go into this temple and they go, I'm so sorry. And then, they put some money in the pot and all the guilt is taken away and they go out with a big smile on their face and do it all over again. And they just keep repeating this process. Hopefully they get one more I'm sorry before they drop dead, And what we're used to in the pagan community is I will not, which means I take responsibility for my actions, which means I'm responsible for anything that I do. And it seems rather foreign to us in the pagan community that people would view the world that way. But that's the way these people are. They think that, they are flawed from the outset. They have no power. They are condemned to this. And this is the only option open to them. And these people who perpetrate this satanic panic and things of that sort know this. They use this. This is their means of power over them. This is the way to manipulate them and make a lot of money. So, yeah, I mean, you've got televangelists every Sunday morning spouting this stuff, and none of them are responsible for disclosing any of their finances to the government. Mm-hmm. It's a license to print money, and they know it.
And so we were talking about Bill Schnabel in a little bit, and you had mentioned that he actually has some background in Wicca, and I know he claims that he has some background in Satanism. And I contacted the Church of Satan, and they've never heard of him. And
no, he's never been a member of any satanic church. He's originally from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and back in the late 60s, early 70s, he was involved with the Alexandrians briefly. He studied with Gavin and Yvonne Frost at the Church and School of Wicca. So he does have a little bit of experience. He knows a few things about Wicca, but he was basically trying to start his own coven. He actually made claims that he had 180 to 200 people doing circles with him. We know, talking to his associates from back then, it was no more than 20. But he was looking to put together a group of followers. It was pretty evident that this is something he was trying to do. And he ultimately gave up on that. He briefly studied with Eli Taylor from the Mental Science Institute, which was kind of a really interesting amalgam of witchcraft and almost Mormon sort of beliefs. Mm-hmm. He then got himself involved with the old Catholic orders, which is a real puzzle. People claiming that they're Catholics and periodically ordaining and excommunicating each other. Mm. And he got ordained as a Catholic bishop by one of them. And that was Church of All Worlds was a group that he briefly studied with, and he made it to fourth circle, and then Morning Glory kicked him out because he was power tripping and being a nuisance. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately he studied briefly some Mormon stuff, and then he decided, I'm going to do this thing that he's doing now. I'm a fundamentalist Christian, and using all the bits and pieces of all of those things that he studied to present the illusion that he was a satanic priest and a national or international leader. Mm-hmm. And, there are people out there that know him. We know what he did. We can prove it. It's a matter of public record, but he won't admit to it. And, he'll just claim, oh, well, they had higher levels that you can't get to. Well, yeah, not happening. But, he basically is imitating a lot of the stuff that Michael Warnke put in his book. It's all the same sort of story. And I mean, Michael Warnke is a classic example because he's claiming that he went to university, became a drug addict, worked himself all the way up to a national leader. And if you study the timeline that he's got in his book, he did this in 5 weeks. Well, it's not going to happen. Sorry, you can't even start displaying symptoms of drug addiction in 5 weeks if you start using. And he describes himself as having 6-inch long black fingernails, and he's emaciated and he's a mess. We have a picture of him at that time, and he's just an ordinary looking guy with glasses in school. It's garbage. He went around to his former schoolmates with a copy of the Satan Seller, tried to get them signed an affidavit saying this is true, and they refused to, of course. He's done all kinds of crazy things like this to try to create a backstory, and this is typical of a lot of these people. We'll get whatever pieces we can and put them in that backstory to make it look like it really happened. But if you look closely, you can easily see that it didn't. And he's a very good example of this.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he's done as well as he's done because Michael Warnke he's a comedian and he's a charismatic guy and he's a really good speaker and Bill isn't.
Right.
He's a lousy speaker, right? Yeah. I'm surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, it is surprising. Yeah, I haven't come across Warnke before. maybe I'll have to do some research on him. But I mean, if there's people who claim to have done something and now they're kind of like now they're not really pushing it, it doesn't really bother me. Maybe they've lost interest in it.
Yeah.
But it seems like
it's useful.
Huh?
It's useful to know Warnke's story because it's been imitated so many times. It's very useful to see kind of the foundation story that a lot of people are using. I'll send you the article I wrote on that. It's all there. And like I said, it was partially, he was partially uncovered by Cornerstone Magazine, which is a Christian evangelical magazine. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that this is something which is spread across the entire Christian community. I want to be really, really clear. We're talking about a very vocal minority here,
right,
that do not represent the majority at all. I worked in interfaith councils. I've done lots of good work with people in Christian churches that they're, for the most part, very understanding, loving people. They don't do this kind of stuff. It's a very small group of idiots we're talking about here. And,
yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I know because I spent a good 8 years here in San Francisco working in the nonprofit organizations, and there's a lot of Christian Catholic groups in San Francisco that do all kinds of great stuff. And so, yeah, I agree. And it's one of the things that I also try to mention in my videos every so often is it's not all Christians and all Catholics and all evangelicals. No. It's usually just a small minority of people who just want to disparage us and make us look bad. Most of the time, the Christians really they're not worried about other people. They're more worried about themselves and taking care of their community. Mm-hmm. And, so I'm not into bashing Christians. That's not no. what I'm into at all. But I am interested in exposing people who are basically spreading lies about.
Yes, and there are people in the Christian community who are embarrassed about this as well. And right. You'll find just as many people within that community who are working to discredit these people as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, and we
sure.
were talking about the Order of the Paladins, which used to be the Order of
Paladins.
Skathach or Skaya.
Order Skaya.
Skaya.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, and I mentioned this a moment ago, when I was involved as leader of Officers of Avalon, representing police, firefighters, and paramedics. On a weekly basis, I get people asking to become members, and you'd ask them, well, which of those three trades are you? And they'd say, well, I'm not any of them. And you go, well, why are you asking then? Because we're representing those trades. And we, thank you for your interest, but why would you want? Because you guys are an order of knights. You go, really? Okay. And I know from writing my warrior-themed books, Wiccan Warrior, Full Contact Magic, stuff like that there was an interest in the warrior archetype within the pagan communities, and people were exploring how do we do that. Mm-hmm. And basically, it's not about fighting, it's about being effective. It's not about using these, it's about using this. So this is another step. I mean, there are and have been in all kinds of different communities codes of chivalry. You see that this is a very prominent thing in Asatru, for example, different codes that people live by. So I thought, well, let's work with this. Let's put it out there. Let's make something out of this. And the Order of Skaya was the original prototype, if you will, which later morphed into the Order of Paladins. And basically the idea is it's about service. It's about service to your community. It's about service to your, to the greater community, not just the pagan community. It's about living according to a code of chivalry. It's living according to a set of precepts. And it's about accepting your power and using it responsibly, So we found a number of people that were interested in this concept, and I'm continuing to teach this and work with people with this. And it's not meant to be a tradition on its own. It's meant to be something you can use in whatever tradition you're part of, whatever path you're on. It's not, I am Wiccan, but you don't necessarily have to be Wiccan to do this, because it's about knighthood, not about a particular faith. And, I don't make any money doing this. It's something I put out there. It's a passion, and it's something that a number of people share with me. So we have a website, orderofpaladins.com, and you can go there, and all of this is open learning. All of the classes, lessons, everything are out there so everyone can see them. And when I first did that, some people questioned me on that. They said, "Oh, you're giving away your power." And I laughed. I said, "You know what? I'm not giving away anything. It's like I can hand you the textbook, you can memorize it, but it doesn't mean you're going to master it. So you have to do the work, but there's nothing secret. There's no third degree mysteries. I hate that term. Everything is open, everything is out there, and it's about, sharing stuff. So that's kind of what that's about. And, I continue to write about the use of energy and power as we practice it in that order. Basically, we don't, the way we start in the order is not by showing you rituals or showing you that sort of stuff. We start by saying, let's explore you. Let's figure out how energy is perceived by you, how you can work with it, what your power is. And once you got that feeling, that understanding, now you get a base. Now let's put it into ritual and use it in other applications to see what you can do with that. And it led to other books, like the most recent being Stand Like a Tree, Mastering the Movement of Energy. And it's all a different way of doing, things. And partially this is as a result of me studying martial arts, for many, many years as part of being in law enforcement. That was something I was led into, and you get an appreciation for using energy, chi, whatever you want to call it. And so it's remarkable how easy it is to use this stuff, but how so many people are confused by it. I mean, I was at Convocation a number of years ago in Detroit. I had a whole series of people come up to me and say, well, I'm having a problem with negative energy and I need to protect myself against perceived threats out there, and can you teach me how to ward and shield? And actually, it's 2 elders bring people forward saying, this is my student, and can you, and I said, no, because you don't need shields. You need to learn how to swim. You've got all this energy around you, which isn't necessarily negative or positive. It's just energy, and you can connect with it or not. But I mean, energy follows intent. You can work your way through it. You can say, I don't want that. I don't want that. That what I want. You don't have to put up shields. It's a different approach to things. It's when the order does a ritual, we have a circle, which is a sacred space, but we don't necessarily put up a energy wall around it to protect us because we don't really need it. If somebody or something was to send something negative in, all heads would turn and we go, really? And we deal with it, and then we get on doing what we were doing because we don't need the wall. We might put up a wall to make it slightly less hectic if we're in an environment where there's all kinds of chaotic energy around and we're just trying to make it a more pleasant experience. But, it's just a different way of looking at things, and a way of looking at yourself as being more powerful and less the victim of things that are coming at you. So that's kind of the approach that we take with that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You were talking about the third degree mysteries, and I agree. I think that there's a lot of there's different theories and different ideas, but one of the main things is that I kind of focus on is helping people to, like you say, to first of all feel energy. You have to be able to perceive it. And if you can't perceive it, there's no way that you can, in my opinion, that you will ever be able to manipulate it, because you don't exactly understand what you're manipulating, what you're doing with it. And it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
How many people in the Wiccan community have this thing that the Wiccan read, and they go, and harm none, do what thou wilt. And we're really good at the first part, harm none. And that's great. The world could use more of that. But where they fall flat is the second part. Because it's saying, be glorious, be all you can be, reach for the stars, carpe diem, And they don't.
Right.
And I don't know why, I mean, it is maybe because they're afraid of the responsibility involved. But I mean, I'd like to see more people realize their full potential. But I mean, that's part of the reason we teach us the way we do. Let's figure out who you are. I mean, you ask people for a description of themselves, and they'll typically give you, here's strengths, here's weaknesses. And if they do that, you take the two, you ball them up, you throw them in the garbage, and say, here's a new single piece of paper. The title is characteristics. List it, because everything that you listed on those two lists is useful. It's the context. It's all about how you use it. Stubborn can be a problem, but stubborn can get you across the finish line. Mm. So you start thinking about yourself as how do I effectively use what I am? That is kind of the basis of your power. And I think that's a really good basis for a lot of pagan people to work from.
Mm-hmm. So I'm keeping an eye on the chat here, and it looks like we have a question from Darkness James. He asks, May I ask his opinion of people who are pagan rather than Wiccan?
Do you know what? If you took 10 people from any religion at all, Methodist, Catholic, whatever label they care to give to it, pagan, Wiccan, Asatru, and you ask them to define their religion, you will get 10 different answers every single time. Religion is an individual path. We get together under a title and we share it, and that's cool. But for everybody, it's an individual experience. And one of the things that attracted me to the pagan path, the Wiccan one specifically, was it wasn't about an apostolic succession necessarily or a structure in a hierarchy. It's about we're all clergy. We're all powerful in one way or another. We share this. We are brothers and sisters. This is about us helping each other, If somebody says, what's the word of God? I say, sit down and listen, because you don't need me to decipher it for you. This isn't a revealed religion. We don't have scripture. As a mentor, as an elder, it's my job to teach you that, to walk the path, but it's your path. Might be parallel to mine, but if it isn't, that's cool, So, if people want to use the term pagan, I don't have a problem with that, because they have their own concept of what that means. And as long as they have a clear concept, no problem. Call it anything you like. Call it nothing at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think especially now, because back in my day, the way that I found out about Wicca, witchcraft, paganism is luckily I grew up in the Bay Area, so there was a lot of bookstores and I could go and read about it. Maybe I knew somebody who was, in the OTO or the AA, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or Gardnerian or whatever, so I could actually talk to them and get firsthand experience. But for a lot of people, the only way that they could find out about it was to go to a bookstore and get a book. And now we have the internet, and so people are almost bombarded by information. And so one of the things that I notice right now is that what we would have called pagan back in my day has grown exponentially, and you have all of these various people within this spectrum. And I find that just the term pagan and witch almost doesn't even cover all of these people anymore. It's really quite expansive. So I think it's very easy for us to get caught up in labels and wanting to categorize people into certain categories. But if you find that, and I'm kind of talking to the audience right now, if you don't find yourself fitting in a certain box, don't be afraid to let go of that label and try another one. Or maybe for a while, don't even wear a label. I mean, if you're, like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of like know thyself. And if you
that is the first precept of the order is know thyself, because that is the basis. And I had this conversation with a Wiccan author who was writing a book on advanced witchcraft, and after about 2 weeks, she reached out to the elders she knew and went, "I'm stuck. What is it?" And just about everyone said it gets simpler. You discard all of the superfluous stuff and you get down to a core practice, and it's really, really simple. It's how you walk your path 24/7 every day of the year, and that's not necessarily going to work for everybody, because your particular place in life, your community, what you do for a living, they all have an effect on how you have to function. So, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you, but that doesn't mean it's wrong or it's different. It's just, this is my, practice here. We're more a religion of practice than creed. It's about how it works for us, not what's written down somewhere, So if people are uncomfortable with that, they should sort of relax and just sort of let it happen, because again, it's an individual path. It's how it works for you, and sharing it with others doesn't mean you have to be the same as others. It just means we all respect each other and help each other walk those paths.
And just out of curiosity, who was the Wiccan author? Did she already write the book?
Yeah, she did, and it was a good one. So yeah, it was Eden McCoy.
Oh, okay, Eden McCoy.
But it's you look at all of those different books by different people. They have their own different perspectives, and you go through them, and it's probably best described in a martial arts context. There's this guy named Bruce Lee that I think everybody knows, and he wrote this book which he hadn't quite finished when he passed away. It was called the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, but it did get published. And essentially what it says in there is what you do is you go to a dojo, a school, whatever, and you can either study this for the rest of your life and find that there are certain things you do very well, and there are certain things that maybe you can't do to save your life. Maybe you can punch really well, maybe you can't kick above your waist. And you can knock yourself out trying to master that, or you can say, okay, I've got all the things that work, put them in the toolbox. Nice knowing you. Go on to the next school, take all the things that work, put them in the toolbox, go to the next school. And in the end, you got all the things that work for you. Mm-hmm. And it's not a style that's like anyone else, but it doesn't have to be. It has to be something that works for you. That's what you should do with anything spiritual as well. Go out there, try things, work with things. I mean, I run into this situation when people say, I can't ground because I'm trying to send my energy into the ground. And you go, what energy does that speaks to you? What is that? And they go, fire. I went, why aren't you grounding to fire or water or air? You can do it. If you look at Asian medical arts, Tai Chi, Qigong, that sort of thing, they do that. So do that. It doesn't have to be the same as everybody else. I've got a book of shadows that I very carefully copied out in Theban script in this beautiful colored ink, and I can't read a word of it. Right. It's useless. So I started again. I did it in English. 2/3 of that stuff is useless to me. Doesn't mean it's useless to everybody. It just means that stuff isn't me. It doesn't work for my set of skills. But so a book of shadows shouldn't be something you copy from somebody else. It should be a journal where you record everything that worked or didn't. Because someday you might find something that makes some of those things that didn't work before work for you now. It's just something you hadn't got to yet, That's probably the more sensible approach, Take it as something that's going to work for you and make you powerful rather than trying to imitate or copy something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Theban script because I remember a long time ago trying to write in Theban script. I don't know if I was writing my Book of Shadows or kind of like in like a little journal before my Book of Shadows, but I couldn't read it back. I's look like G's, and it was just really confusing. And so I just gave up on it, and I found another script that worked for me. And, I still like Theban, but in my opinion, it's clumsy. I just can't use it. And there's a lot of people who, they don't understand why I have such a problem with Theban script. They love it. They say, oh, I write it and I understand it. I'm like, well, that works for you. It just doesn't work for me.
Basic Miyamoto Musashi, Book of Five Rings. If it works, do it. If it doesn't,
right,
get rid of it. Don't do it because it's traditional, because it's the way it's always been done, because it's the way they do it. Do it because it works. That's the thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I know for my Book of Shadows, originally what it was I had copied out from a Book of Shadows. the teacher that we had at the time, I copied out of their Book of Shadows. And later on, when I joined another group, the group that I'm currently in, everything was on electronic, so I got not the electronic version, but I got a big printed version of it. And so, it also depends. Like if you're a solitary and you're buying a book, and you might copy a part of a book out and put it in your own Book of Shadows, because that's a part, like you said before, it's a tool that you're pulling out and putting into your book and somebody else's book. And now I find I have like 6 or 7 like physical books, and then I have like a whole bunch of books online, or on my computer, that are Books of Shadows in progress. So it's really interesting how people develop their own style and incorporate stuff.
Gerald Gardner wrote his Ye Book of Art Magical, his Book of Shadows, 4 times.
Right.
He did different editions.
Right. So
you're following the originator of the whole thing if you're doing it that way. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's meant to grow as well. It's meant to evolve. One of the things that I run into frequently with people who learn from books, and there's nothing wrong with books, and a large portion of the community at the time of the Satanic Panic, when I was doing this stuff, about 80% of the community was solitary, Mm-hmm. That's changing. We're a very rapidly growing religious community, all of the pagan faiths, but you lack a certain amount of experience. I've been in rooms with 100 people and I've shown them a very simple exercise, which is meant to start the chi, the energy flowing. You go, who felt something, and people saying, wow, I never felt that before. And I went, how long have you been doing magic? Mm-hmm. And they've been decades, and you should feel that every single time. You missed something here. So if you're reading the book, that's fine, but go out there, practice this stuff, do the exercises, pay attention to all of your senses, not just your visual, and work with it, because that's where you're going to start figuring out who you are and what you're going to do with it.
You've written quite a few books now. I was looking at your web page, and you have written How to Be Glorious, Full Contact Magic. What are some of the
Wiccan Warrior.
Wiccan Warrior.
Stand Like a Tree, Mastering the Movement of Energy. I wrote a book, Witch Hunts, which is about coming out, but it's also about the Satanic Panic and the sort of things people did. So if you're concerned about that stuff, you can see how to refute the stuff if you encounter it. Mm-hmm. And I've written sword and sorcery, fantasy, and paranormal romance too. And I've got 24 books out there right now. My last book was actually a book on how to build a small observatory, because I'm the National Secretary of the Royal Astronomical Society. And people go, you're an astronomer and you're a witch? How does that work? Well, it works very well, because we're encouraging people to reconnect with the earth and the energy of the earth around us and be stewards. And 2/3 of the world's population can't see the night sky because of light pollution anymore. And it's amazing how many people will come up to the Sunshine Coast where I live now and look at the sky and go, what's that glowing cloud in the sky? And you go, that's home. That's your galaxy. But they've never seen it. Right. And if you want people to respect something, they have to be able to perceive it. There have more than 550 astronauts go to outer space, and they have all looked back at the Earth against the background of the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe beyond, and they've experienced this thing called the overview effect, which has completely changed their perception of the world and given them a new respect for ecology and environmental concerns. And there's more than 7 billion of us down here. We're never going to be able to go up there, but you can do the next best thing. You can show people that sky that our ancestors had 20,000 years ago. That was the source of myth and divination and all kinds of things. And so this fits very well, being an astronomer and a Wiccan priest. It works very well for me. And I'm actually right now about to fly to Winnipeg to finish off a documentary we're doing for the Bravo Network, a 15-minute Bravo Factual called Starry Nights, which is about that very subject. It's about reconnecting people with the skies our ancestors saw, and hopefully we'll be handing that in at the end of November, and it'll be out on the Bravo network in January, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, nice. And so that's going to be out in January, you thinking, huh?
We hope so. Yeah, it'll be up to the Bravo network. My partner in this is Dodie Graham McKay, who is a Wiccan priestess from Winnipeg, who is a director and production manager and author from the Wild Hunt. That's right.
Oh, okay.
And we're hoping that we'll get it out there and you will all be able to see it soon.
Oh, good. I'll have to look for that. And I enjoy the Wild Hunt. That's a great online magazine.
Yes, it is.
So if people in the chat have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them out there, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability if we can. And if we can't, well, then we'll say we can't. So you're also a fantasy writer. You've written a couple of fantasy novels?
As CANS, I've written the Purification trilogy, and which is a sword and sorcery fantasy thing. And as Carrie Bryce, I've written the Darkman trilogy, which is paranormal romance. And you write under a female name because nobody believes a guy can write romance. It's funny how that works. Oh yeah, there's an awful lot of male authors, and they all write it under female nom de plume. It's just
that's funny. That's kind of like the opposite of what it used to be. Before, women authors had to take on male names so that they could be published. So now, at least romance, it's the other way around.
There's a definite advantage being a romance author when you're male, because you go to a romance writers conference, there's no lineup for the guys here ever.
Right. Yeah.
So it's all women. 400 women lining up for the ladies' room, but there's only 5 guys. So, there are certain advantages, but writing is a passion. My family, there's an awful lot on my mother's side of the family. There's a lot of artists, and my daughter is into painting as well. But with me, it comes out as words, vocal or written. And, until recently, 24 books. It's been books, but now, with, this project for Bravo, it's, scripts. So we're going into a new realm. It's very exciting, exploring this new way of presenting things.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We got a couple of questions here.
Sure.
First one was the Jinzo. The Jinzo, I missed your question about the BOS, so if you want to print it in there again, we'll answer it. And then there was another question from the Jinzo. He asks, "You seem interesting, Kerr. How long have you been practicing?"
Well, thank you. 48 years I've been on this path. It's been a while. And, I still identify as Wiccan, but I'm a particular kind of version of that, kind of a warrior version of that. And, I'm still actively trying to help people work with that warrior archetype, male and female. And it's been exciting, and I enjoy teaching, because every time I teach, I learn even more. I'm still, after 48 years, learning stuff. So and teaching, I'm going to be teaching at Convocation in Detroit, in February. So I'm still going out there and doing that. And I've never ever received an honorarium, or when people have, on one occasion that they did, I turned around and donated it, because this is my way of giving back to the community, everything that I've got from it. So, it's definitely a passion for me.
Mm-hmm. I've never been to, we have an air siren that goes off every noon on Tuesday. So if you hear that in the background, that's what that is. I'm not being blamed. But, I've never been to Convocation, but we have here in San Jose, we have we have the Pantheacon. Have you ever
Yes.
been out here for that?
I have not had the privilege of going to that one yet. One of these days soon, hopefully. Now that I'm retired, but I've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
The Bravo show isn't the only one I'm working on. I've got 2 seasons in on a show called Night Lights, which is on Coast Cable, and there's another one that we're working on for another network. So the TV stuff is a big thing for me these days.
So yeah, so
But
it sounds like even though you're retired, you're very busy.
Yeah,
nice.
my wife and I just celebrated our 25th anniversary by going on a cruise on Princess Cruises to Hawaii, and I ended up lecturing on board. I did 8 talks on astronomy and did sessions up on the top deck doing stargazing. So it was a lot of fun, and it's something you're going to see me doing a lot more of. So.
Oh, that's nice. It sounds like it's something you like to do. So, let me see. Cool. Don't most people copy from the Coven BOS? Oh, okay. So the Jinzo's question was, "Wow, cool." And I asked, "Don't most people copy from the Coven BOS? Ain't it normal / accepted?"
It is in some, British traditions. It is commonplace for you to take the Coven's or the High Priestess's Book of Shadows and copy it. And there's no problem with that, because you're basically you're recording their notes or their stuff. But that should be a starting point, and you shouldn't just leave it there. You should keep going and put your own stuff in there and experiment and be honest with yourself. If something that everyone else in the Coven is doing doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you're different and you should be doing something else. And that's okay. I think one of the strengths of a Coven is having all kinds of people with different abilities, right, so that in a given situation you can rely on different groups of people to do things, because this group is better in that situation and maybe I'm better in this one. So that's cool. But don't get stuck with this is the one way. This isn't a one-size-fits-all proposition. Religion isn't like that. It's about you perceiving the world completely and being completely connected with everything, and then, using that, empowering yourself. And that's hard to do if you're trying to use someone else's system and they are quite different from what you are, basically.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really funny, my scenario where I actually physically hand copied from a Book of Shadows was in a small group here in San Francisco, where we were using the Janet and Stuart Farrar book, and so it was already in printed format, but it was copied over into the High Priestess's Book of Shadows, and then there was a section of her Book of Shadows that I copied, and that was it. I just took this one section, and then the rest was hers. And so only this one section I copied. And then later on, when I actually joined a traditional, British traditional Gardnerian coven, there was no hand copying. It was already, printed out and given to me. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of funny that it was different for both times. Most people think that a traditional Gardnerian coven, you would hand copy it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're getting modern. My original tradition, initiations were Georgian and New Reformed Orthodox Order of the Golden Dawn, Naruk. And, in the first degree initiation, they've got these things, here's the sword, and you can use it to, threaten the spirits, and they've got all these different tools they present to you and say, here's these tools, and you're going to use them. And you go, great, now we're getting down to business. They're going to show me how to do this. Mm-hmm. I'm still waiting. I mean, nobody had any idea how to use these things. And this is one of the challenges when I started writing about warrior philosophy. Well, okay, these are magical weapons. Let's treat them as weapons. Let's figure out how to use these things. That's a large part of the Order of Paladins. These are respected weapons. There are weapons you don't even recognize necessarily as one, like the chalice and the cauldron. But I mean, don't feed the troops. They don't march too far. Can't heal them if they get hurt. That's not going to work very well. I mean, you can't do divination. You can't see what's coming, so there's all kinds of different aspects, and it's if you've got a book of shadows, don't get stuck there. Move from that. Like, look at each of the things in there and figure out, how do I use this? How does this work? Let's study the wand and figure out what this is. I mean, I ran into a coven once, a wonderful group of people, but they were saying, we're very peaceful. We don't have any weapons, no edge weapons in here, no swords, no athames. We just have a wand. And I'm thinking, wand is one of the oldest weapons there is. It's a stick.
Right.
You know, I mean, but it's the intent that you use it for, obviously, but you've got to understand stuff like this, because you'll run into problems if you don't. I mean, karate means empty hands. There, weapons right there, 2 of them. My feet are weapons. This is the ultimate weapon. I mean, you recognize it as a warrior, but again, it isn't about fighting. It's about being effective. You know, it's not about using violence. It's about managing it. So yeah, definitely think outside of the box. Go beyond the book. You know, explore. It's a useful thing to do. It'll reveal all kinds of things that you can find that are useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Good advice. So, all right, Kerr, we're a little over an hour now, so I know you probably have other things to do. I don't want to keep you over. I think we pretty much touched most of the stuff that we were going to talk about.
I think so, but we can always do this again sometime and touch on other things.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. It sounds like you're pretty busy. Maybe later on, maybe late second week of November or something. But I'll email you. And maybe
we'll work it out
another time.
Sure.
All right.
I'd love to do that for you.
Yes, and thank you so much, Kerr. It was a pleasure. It was kind of funny because I've actually wanted to contact you and set up a time to chat like this, and because I was doing videos on Bill Schnabel and I read your article on Witchvox, I was like, oh, this is like the perfect opportunity to have an excuse to have him come on my show and chat. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate this, and I respect the work you're doing, and I hope that we can do this again.
Definitely. I will email you and let you know. And to all of you in the chat, thank you for the questions. I hope we got all of them. I hope I didn't miss one. If I did, sorry about that. But maybe next time when Kerr comes back, maybe we can answer those questions again. So, again, thank you so much, Kerr, and blessed be.
Blessed be. Safe journeys.